Page 150 continued. Pope and the 18th century poetic diction. By poetic diction we mean the choice and arrangement of words so as to achieve the desired effect. It differs according to the subject, the literary form, and the age in which a particular work is written. In every age, poets have developed their own poetic diction, which markedly differs from the speech of everyday life. In good poets, poetic diction varies according to the character who is supposed to be speaking at a particular moment. That is, it is in character. Pope and the other writers of the pseudo-classic school paid more heed to their poetic diction than any other poet in the language. The most important elements in Pope's poetic diction are periphrasis or circumlocution, personification of inanimate characters, abstractions, and frequent Latinisms. End of page 150, now page 151. By periphrasis or circumlocution, we mean a roundabout way of expression, or the expression of the sense of one word in many words. Pope used this device to overcome the use of words which were considered low, mean, or commonplace. Thus, Pope does not use fish because it is considered a low word, but funny prey. Thus, Pope does not use fish because it was considered a low word, but funny prey. He does not use cup, but earth of China. Latinisms and personifications too are frequently used by him for the same reason, that is, to achieve elevation and dignity. The use of Sol, S-O-L, irriguous and umbrageous, and only a few examples are few examples of the poet's Latinity. Personifications not only impart elevation but also force and concern and concentration. To quote only one instance out of hundreds, quote, "And all Arabia breathes from yonder box, the tortoise here and the elephant unite, transformed to combs, the speckled and the white." Another device used by a pope to achieve his ends is antithesis, that is, the opposition or bringing together in the same line of the great and the small, of the insignificant and the significant. This device has been used throughout the Rape of the Lock and the poet's chief meaning of creating the mock heroic effect. Pope's correctness. Another notable feature of Pope's style and language is his correctness. Pope was a great artist with words. He revised and re-revised, corrected and recorrected carefully and painstakingly, with the result that he became the most correct of all English poets. Many of his best lines owe their force, dignity and effect to careful revision. He was a conscientious artist, a sincere craftsman who tried to say what he had to say through the best and the fewest possible words. Precise and quotable. Pope's language is remarkable for its neatness, polish and aptness of words and phrases. He is the most precise of English poets. There are more epigrams and more quotable lines in him than any other English writer outside Shakespeare. He selected his words carefully and weighed and balanced their sense, their music, their aptness before he used them. He was a learned poet, and many of the words chosen by him are remarkable for their associative value. His style is full of literary reminiscences. reminiscences, reminiscences. Clarity of style. Another important quality of Pope's style is its clarity. He is the most clear, just as he is the most correct of English poets. There is nothing of the extravagance and obscurity of the Elizabethan, the metaphysical, and the romantics. Tennyson alone could approach him in the clearness of his thought and expression. His lines were well balanced, lucid, and transparent. There is no ambiguity in him and no carelessness. Pope's style and diction have, however, been criticized as artificial and unnatural. He has been called mechanical and affected, affected. It has also been pointed out that he lacks spontaneity, grace, and the ease of manner. There is much in him which seems to be forced and labored. The qualities of lucidity, clearness, and logic are prosaic. The true poetic qualities are poetic rapture, intensity, the glow of passion, and imagination. His poetry is devoid of all these elements. He has only wit and no originality. He spins out commonplaces with a mechanical regularity which becomes dull and monotonous. There is much truth in all this criticism, but in his defense it has been said that he was the child of his age and his faults are the faults of his age, the age of prose and reason. He had his audience constantly in mind. He was writing for the wits, fops, and gallants of the day, who would never have appreciated any poetic rapture or any outburst of passion. The society demanded correctness, wit, and good sense, and this is exactly what the poet gives it. The fashionable society of the day had outward brilliance and glitter, though it was quite empty within. People's style too had this outward glitter and brilliance. He did never bother about the thought. His muse is the drawing room muse, and his language is the essence of the conversation of courtly circles. It has the same movement, brilliance, and boldness. According to J.R. Lowell, Pope was the chief founder of an artificial poetry which in his hands was living and powerful, because he used it to express artificial modes of thinking and an artificial state of society. Measured by any high standard of imagination, he will be found wanting, tried by any test of wit, he is unrivaled. Verse satire in the verse satire in the 18th century. The 18th century is remarkable as a period in which the satiric spirit reigned supreme. The names of all the important writers are associated with satire. In fact, their very greatness is due mostly to their greatness of satire, to their greatness as satirists. End of page 151. Now page 152. The three most important writers of the age were Pope, Swift, and Dr. Johnson. Whereas Pope and Dr. Johnson gave English language some of its best verse satires. The second name gave it the best prose satires. But apart from this redoubtable triumvirate, the names of 100 other lesser satirists can be mentioned. In addition to the regular satires, the satiric spirit seeps through other modes of writing too. The novel and the periodical paper were the two important gifts of the 18th century to English literature. These new genres too are exhibitive of the impact of the same satiric spirit which was ubiquitous in the age. Some of the most delightful satire of the age is provided by the periodical papers of Steele, 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 Edison and their followers, and the novels of Fielding, Smollett and Sterne. As a satire ruled the most as a genre, satire ruled the roost till roughly the third quarter of the century, when two new tendencies appeared to the detriment of the satiric spirit. The precursion of the Romanticism found satire incompatible with their new sensibility. Satire naturally declined, and since then, up to the present day, very few satires have appeared which can show the same brilliance as characterized 18th century satires. Reasons for dominance. All satire arises from the sense of dissatisfaction, despair, amusement, anger, or disgust at the departure of things from their ideals. Satire aims at pointing out and chastening the falling short of things from their well-accepted standards of excellence. It is only when standards get fixed that any departure from them can be measured or appreciated. In the 18th century particularly, its first half, the standards of human conduct were more or less well fixed. This century has been variously called the age of good sense, the age of good taste, the age of reason, etc. Almost all the writers of the age harped upon common sense, good taste, and what they called right reason. Any departure from them, real or imaginary, puts the whip of the satirist into action. Further, the accentuation of the political division of Englishmen into Whigs and Tories also nurtured and provided much material for the satiric spirit. Nearly every important writer of the first half of the 18th century was employed by either the Tory of the Whig party or the Whig party to further its cause and to down its opponents. Pope, Swift, Arbuthnot, Prior, Addison, Steele, all were actively aligned with one party or the other, even though they did not write many political satires of the nature of Dryden's Absalom and Achitophel and the Medal. Thirdly, we have to take into account the fierce personal animosities of the writers of the age. It was in the 18th century that for the first time in the history of English literature, the vocation of a man of letters, like other professions, became a lucrative job. With the unprecedented increase in the number of readers, consequent mainly upon the expansion of trade and commerce and the resulting richness the printed word could sell. Pope and some others depended for their livelihood entirely upon the patronage of their readers. With the phenomenal rise in the number of readers, there was an equally phenomenal rise in the numbers of writers, many of whom decorated the garrets of Grub Street. Each of them was necessarily jealous of all the rest, as it involved his very livelihood. The whole air was thick with mutual animosities among them, among writers, and the personal satire which they gave rise to. Even Pope's Dunciad, the most powerful and the best satire of the 18th century, was expressly written to lash his literary rivals and critics. His translation of Homer and edition of Shakespeare has proved for him the most lucrative assets, and when they were attacked partly justly by partly unjustly by critics like Bentley and Theobald, it was reason enough for him to try to satirize them into silence. Formative and guiding influences. There were three formative and guiding influences on satire in the 18th century. They were the tradition of the Roman Augustan satire of Horace, Juvenal and Persius, the tradition of the French satire of the neoclassic school, and the neoclassical native tradition of Dryden. The French satirists like Boileau, Boileau, were themselves influenced by the Roman satirists, and Dryden was influenced by both the Roman and the French. Let us now consider these three influences one by one. Number 1. As regards the influence of the Roman satirists, it is quite apparent in the work of Pope, Dr. Johnson and others. Horace and Juvenal, the two greatest Roman satirists, did not write the same kind of satire. Horatian satire is, generally speaking, of the comic, and the Juvenalian satire of the tragic kind. End of page 152, now page 153. Horace is polished, good-natured, precise, but sly, pretty tolerant and somewhat lenient, and always indirect. Juvenal, on the other hand, is mordant, 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 direct, intolerant, stately, intense, and disdainful. Whereas Pope came mostly under Horace's influence, Dr. Johnson was evidently influenced by Juvenal. Number 2. Boileau was the most important of the neoclassical French satirists. Dryden himself came under his influence. Boileau's Le Lutrin, 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 was presumably the first example of a mock heroic poem in world literature. Dryden's Macflecknoe was also a mock epic. In the 18th century, we find Pope giving a mock heroic framework to his famous satires. The Rape of the Lock and the Dunciad. Swift likewise followed the lead of Boileau in the Battle of the Books. Scarron, the French poet who parodied Virgil, had also some followers in the 18th century England. Number 3. Last but not the least is the bracing influence of Dryden, who, breaking away from the native satiric tradition of Hall, Marston, Donne, Cleveland, and Butler, had looked for guidance to the Roman satirists and their followers in France. Pope has well been designated Dryden's poetical son. His satires provided so many models for numerous 18th century satirists. The Dunciad followed MacFlecknoe in being a satire on dunces, dunces, dunces. But what is more, Dryden's popularization and effective handling of the heroic couplet for the purpose of satire had a powerful effect on the 18th century. Almost till the good satires of this country were written in heroic couplets. Pope regularized the couplet and made it more precise, balanced, and artistic, and as such provided a model for his successors. But Dryden's freer use of the couplet had also its admirers and imitators, among whom may be mentioned the name of Churchill. Pope as a satirist. Satire predominates in the works of Pope. Even a cursory glance at his poetry reveals that the major part of it consists of satire or is satiric in spirit. The Rape of the Lock, the Dunciad, moral essays, satires, and epistles of Horace imitated are the best of his satires. Conditioning factors. There were various factors which gave a satiric turn to the genius of Pope. The spirit of the times favored the growth of this literary form. Literature was called allied to politics. Nearly every writer of the day was used by the two political parties, the Whig and the Tory, to hurl abuses and invectives at each other. Moreover, it was believed that the function of literature is not merely to entertain, but also to reform. Authors tried to improve the manners and morals of the people. Thus, the aim of Addison was to enliven morality with wit and wit with morality. The result was the predominance of satire, and Pope could not escape the influence of the age. The circumstances of Pope's life and his character also predisposed him to satire. He suffered from a number of disabilities. He was weak, sickly, and deformed. His life was a long disease. He suffered much at the hands of his enemies, who spared neither his family, his works, nor his personal deformities. He wanted to be even with them. His ill health made him ill-tempered and peevish. Peevish, peevish. He was quick to take offense. He was extremely vindictive. The aim of his satire is to cause pain to his enemies. His vindictive nature did not spare even ladies with whom he had once been on friendly terms. Moreover, he was a Catholic, and Catholics in the age suffered from a number of handicaps. They could not lead a full normal life. Pope wanted to have his revenge upon the Protestants too, who were the cause of much of his misery and undeserved suffering. He therefore used the weapon of satire to have his revenge upon them. The Rape of the Lock is a social satire. The Rape of the Lock is Pope's first satire. It is a social satire as well as a mock epic. It is a mocking poem in which Pope mocks not only at the little unguarded follies of the fair sex, but at the artificial social life of the 18th century London as a whole. The fashion, the artificiality, the vanity and the frivolity of the age is exposed and ridiculed with the unfailing grasp of a master. The piece sparkles in every line. The touch is never too heavy. An air of gay and good humor is preserved throughout. The Rape of the Lock is the triumph of the insignificant. The mockery arises from the exaltation of the trivial. At every step there is a skillful mingling of the great with the trivial. In Pope's mock heroic, the forms of chivalrous devotion to women are combined with the reality of cynical contempt. The force of Pope's raillery, raillery, is increased by his neat and dexterous handling of the heroic couplet. Pope's workmanship bears the stamp of Dryden, but in the fullness of sound, energy and majesty he excels his master. End of page 153, now page 154. In the handling of his chosen meter, as well as the force and vividness of his satirical portraiture, he leaves the elder poet far behind. John Dennis therefore praises his skill and says, "It is a satirist that Pope, with one exception, excels all English poets, and Pope's careful workmanship often makes his satirical touches more attractive than Dryden's." The Dunciad. The next notable satire of Pope is the Dunciad, the epic of the dunces. Pope wrote the mock epic to have his revenge on all those who had criticized, sometimes unjustly, his translation of Homer and his edition of Shakespeare. He had planned his revenge carefully, and now he came out with a devastating attack on a number of poetasters and hack writers of Grub Street. Theobald, the noted Shakespearean scholar, was first crowned the hero of Dunciad, but in the fourth book of the second edition, this honor was transferred to Cibber, Cibber. He writes with singular vehemence and virulency, and seems to be enjoying the pain thus inflicted on the victims of his wrath.